Good morning, Father Con. How are you?
Hi, Adriana. Good morning. How are you?
Good. Happy Easter. We're now nearing the end of the first octave.
Absolutely. We're still. I love there's a lovely Christian tradition that Easter Sunday is lived not as one day, but as a whole week. So from the proclamation of the Exultet at the Easter Vigil, all the way through the end of the liturgy on the first Sunday, or the second Sunday of Easter, it's as if it's one day. We're rising each day in the newness of the new life that comes with the resurrection. It's a lovely thought.
It is. It is a lovely thought. And, you know, I find it difficult to really embrace Easter. I know I've alluded to this in past conversations because of the pandemic, because we can't really celebrate the way we want to. So I find that I'm having a tougher time to really get into the Easter spirit, Easter frame of mind.
And the news is not good news. You know, in a time of good news, the news is not good news. And you know, I think many people were, when they heard the high numbers of infection a few weeks ago, people were saying that, well, that's impossible. You know, we're trying to keep a lid on it. All these vaccines are going out, and yesterday we had over, what was it, 4,200?
4,200, yes.
Infections, and the predictions are that for the next 2 weeks at least, we might get as high as 6,000. And again, you know, this glass half empty, glass half full. You want to be positive and see the glass half full. And say, well, we're getting there. But then on the other side, that the empty side, you say, oh my God, when is this going to begin to go down? When are we going to see some improvement? And I had a startling experience yesterday. I went out to do the grocery shopping in the afternoon, and I didn't. It was another lady who was we were in the vegetable section, fruit and vegetable section. And all of a sudden, I'm standing next to a woman who's not wearing a mask.
Oh.
And but it was the lady who was across from both of us. And she said, "Madam," she said, "I'm sorry." She said, "Your mask, have you forgotten your mask?" And this woman became quite, it's not true that she was belligerent, but she said, "I don't wear a mask. I don't wear a mask." And I must have looked startled. And I thought, no, do not.
No.
Or the
don't
staff
go there.
Who must deal with that. And so eventually they did actually catch up with her, just literally within seconds. And the staff were just one staff member. I think he must have been the manager. He was very polite. He took her produce from her and said, "I will take these to the counter, but you must leave immediately." And she started going on about how this is, I could hear her muttering as she is following him, you know, this is not, we're all caught up in conspiracy and lies.
Wow. And I just read an article this morning about the variant. There's 3 variants that are now here. The one from the UK, the B117, the other one from Brazil, and the other one from South Africa. And they are more highly transmissible.
That's right. And
people, between the ages of 20 and 39, they're more highly infected. The people under 60 are ending up in ICU. So that's my age bracket. So I'm a little nervous. And they're just talking about how they think these variants, there's more virus, and when you exhale, it stays in the air longer and it can infect more people, or, you know, it's just scary.
Yeah, it is.
And it can infect up to 15 meters away.
Yeah. Did you see the little video that Cardinal Collins made? No,
I didn't.
Yeah, thankfully he did. I'm very grateful to him because it, and especially in the Toronto area where the numbers are so high, and it's encouraging people to take the vaccine, which
Oh, nice.
is very, very good. In the United
So,
States, we've had a lot of photographs of the bishops. That's the bishops in the US who will take the vaccine.
yes. Well,
Uh,
we are in this Easter season, and I know I've alluded that it's hard for me to get in the Easter spirit because of the pandemic and the news.
mhm.
But let me ask you a question, Father Khan.
Right.
With the promise of Easter and the empty tomb and all that, how do we look at life through our faith lens?
That's a very good question. I mean,
And there's probably not a one size fits all.
it's not a one size fits all. The burden of my homily at the Easter Vigil was it's it's allowing ourselves to discover the light that is in our lives. It's not the light that comes into our lives; it's in our lives. And I love the Exultet, and at St Andrews we had the whole Exultet sung. That it's a gorgeous. The theology, the history in it is a wonderful. I mean, it's a wonderful story, and but it's for the Christian. It's for us on Easter Sunday or at Easter, celebrating Easter. That's our starting point. It's the light has come, the light, and the light is within us. And it's not rekindled every year. I mean, I think one of the things that we do every year is that we clear away the detritus around the wick. We make it clean again so that it can burn even more brightly. And so for me, that's what I would hope that despite the teeter totter that we're on and being pulled in all the different directions that we can be pulled in, that the light is alive and it burns within us. That lovely image of baptism.
Yes.
When the newly baptized, if they're old enough to speak for themselves, or the parents of the child, receive the light of Christ, keep it burning brightly, walk always as a child of the light. May the flame of faith be alive in your heart. When the Lord comes, may you go out to meet him with all the saints in the heavenly kingdom. Go out to meet him with that light burning brightly. I think that if we can, I was in Israel one year when the Orthodox Church was celebrating. It was the week after our Easter, and the Orthodox Church was celebrating Easter, and I was at the Holy Sepulchre for their vigil, which is an all-night vigil.
Wow.
We left the Holy Sepulchre about 6 a.m. To walk back to our hotel, which was very close to the old quarter.
Yes.
But one of the beautiful images, especially coming through the Greek section and the Armenian section, were watching people carrying lanterns that they had lit from the Easter candle that was lit in the Holy Sepulchre.
Right.
And that was the new fire that was going to light the stove, that was going to prepare the dinner that celebrates Easter. I mean, it just goes on and on.
That's beautiful.
A gorgeous image. And I mean, that's a lovely image to carry through the Easter season with us. That, yeah, this is the season where the light needs to shine. We need to bring the light of Christ.
And you know what
into our situation.
I was reflecting on it several years ago. I was reflecting. I don't know why I couldn't let this go at church. I light candles when I get there. I always light candles for people I know, but I would always reflect on a candle, and it was like I couldn't let it go. So I had to keep reflecting on this. So every time I would light a candle, I would look at, okay, so what is it? there's a wick there, and it's got to burn and die off to give the light.
Absolutely.
So then I think, okay, for each of us to be the light, something's got to die off.
Yeah.
Whatever is not helpful,
That's right.
has to burn, and then it's that grace of that us in process, us transforming from not so healthy ways, burn that, and then we become grace, we become light.
Absolutely. Remember that lovely reading of Good Friday, the Good Friday service? Though he was in the form of God, Jesus did not count equality with God as something to be grasped. He emptied himself.
Yes. Yeah.
And then it goes on taking the form of a slave, servant or slave, depending on which translation.
That beautiful Isaiah reading.
Yeah, and then he talks about how it's in this selfless giving, which is a lovely idea, or a lovely way to be about Easter. I mean, for us in the Northern Hemisphere, Easter is the time of new life.
It is.
And
it is.
And the sun, the warmth. I live by the lake, and this morning, as I was working a little bit on the computer, my window overlooks the street, and it's just lovely to see the spring in people's, despite everything.
Yes.
The spring is in people's steps. So.
Yes, and the birds and the buds. I saw someone in my neighborhood, they have a magnolia tree, and it's starting to bloom.
Oh.
Now there's one in our court, and that's not blooming yet. But just outside, beyond our court, this tree, and I noticed it coming home yesterday, and it took me by surprise. What?
I know.
So to even see the magnolia trees blooming, it's just...
Mm-hmm.
It's beautiful.
Absolutely.
So what does Easter mean, really?
I think that's a good question. What does Lent mean?
Yeah, what does Lent, Easter?
Yeah, what does Lent mean? Easter is about rediscovering what we have received. It's about now as the baptized, now that we've done that inward work,
mm-hmm.
It's about looking outward, and it's if there's an image or a thought or an idea that will help us during the season of Easter, it's understanding what does it mean to follow the Lord? What does it mean to be a disciple of the Lord?
I think the story where we need right now to capture this is the Emmaus story.
Absolutely.
I love the Emmaus story.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Because and the Emmaus story is a wonderful story for the 21st century, because when so many people today are unsure or are uncertain about where God is in their lives, where God is in their place.
Yeah.
The Emmaus story is the story of these two men, or it could be a man and a woman. We don't know. We don't. One of whom was called Cleopas. We don't know who the other was.
Right.
Rembrandt is a beautiful etching where one of the two is a woman at the table. There's a scene where they're sitting at the table in Emmaus. So we don't know who they are, but they are burdened as they're walking away from Jerusalem.
Yes. Yeah.
Their best friend has died. Their best friend, something brought them to Jerusalem. There was a purpose that they were committed to, that they were willing to give themselves to, mm-hmm. and it all fell apart. And so they're on the way home, we presume. And it's the little insights. It's like a Beckett play. You've got these little instructions of how It's all unfolding here.
Yes. Yes.
And their faces are downcast, we're told.
Yeah.
And then Jesus comes up to them, but they don't recognize him. So Jesus has risen from the dead. And it's still supposed to be on the first day of the week. And then he says, you guys, you look as if you've lost your best friend. What's
going on?
Oy vey, what's happening here?
Yeah.
And don't you know this? You're coming from Jerusalem and you haven't heard all of the commotion about this man who claimed that he was the Messiah? We thought he was the Messiah.
Mm-hmm.
And how the authorities took him and had him crucified. They tried him and crucified him. And he says, no.
Tell me more.
Yeah, tell me more. Tell me. And they were silent. So, and I love that image of walking.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you've ever had, when you're walking with your best friend, you can have these lovely long moments of silence.
Yes.
Because you don't need to talk. And I'm sure there was a long moment of silence. And then the stranger, who we know as Jesus, begins to talk about the Messiah. And he begins to go into the Old Testament scriptures and unpack those passages from the scriptures. And as they walk along.
Yeah.
And something must have happened on the journey as they're walking along, because when they get to Emmaus, the two disciples say, come with us. There's a 3 for 2 special at
stay for dinner.
Yeah, stay for dinner. And when they're at the dinner, then Jesus prays the beverage. And again, this is where so another lovely little comment from the side. Because he's the strangers, pray the prayer, pray the beverage. So he prays the beverage, the prayer.
Yes.
And they break bread, they share the bread. And I love the line, instantly their eyes were opened.
Yes.
They recognized him in the breaking of the bread, but he had disappeared from their sight. And then the next line, oh my God, what's happened to us here? And that lovely, lovely line, did not our hearts burn within us as he walked with us and talked with us on the road? And then
beautiful line.
Yeah, they pay the bill and off they go back, but not to their home. They go back to Jerusalem to tell the other disciples. And that's the piece of the story I think that we don't use enough. It's the decision to return back. It's the decision to return back to Jerusalem. So what's it all about? It's about remembering. It's about taking. We're on to this line again, or this theme again. It's about taking the time, and it's about them recognize that when they allow themselves to go to that place, to go a little bit deeper, that everything that they need is to be found there. What this encounter does, what this encounter with the risen Lord does, is that it opens the door that was previously closed. And in the words, it's that aha moment that suddenly it's open to them, it's revealed to them. And I mean, isn't that what faith is? Isn't that what
I find that there's a connecting of the dots that Jesus helps them with, because they know the scriptures and they just lived through it, and they were just so intensely in their sadness, their grief. And sometimes when we're like that, we can't see what's obvious. Sometimes we need that other person to come in and say, tell me your story. And so because sometimes we need to go through that of telling our story, and then another person will say, oh, but look, I see that there was a moment of grace there. Or, how many times have we had people who pointed out, you say you're going through this and no one's with you or whatever, but look, there were people all around, or whatever. But it's other people who point out those moments where maybe God was in our lives and we just never saw it.
Absolutely. That's absolutely the key. For a number of years, the college at Olean, the Franciscan College at Olean in New York State, I would go down and do a little program with the Canadians who are going to teach in the province of Ontario. And there were still some staff who had memories. They remembered. I'm not sure that they personally knew Thomas Merton when he taught there, but they certainly knew the stories. They had a long association with the university. And what was so impressive about the story was they were able to fill in some dots that are not in the 7-story mountain. I remember asking once, I said, tell me a little bit about, Merton talks a lot about how he loved to, when he lived in New York, when he was at Columbia University, he loved to sit at the back of the church. And did he ever talk about what was happening sitting at the back of the church? But what this lovely old priest had this great insight. He said, Merton was waiting. And he knew enough to know that it would become clear to him. So what does that mean?
Yeah.
If you take the story of the road to Emmaus, we can imagine that Merton isn't just sitting there going, okay, I'm waiting. You can imagine that the inner conversation, the conversation of the heart, and the conversation of the mind, is that like you said, he's putting the dots are being put together.
Yes.
And in that lovely way that grace manifests itself,
yes,
it becomes clear. It becomes clear. And he finds the way forward. It finally becomes clear to him. And I think that that's the story of the road to Emmaus. If there's a lesson for the church in the modern world, I think that the lesson for the modern world is stop talking and listen.
and the listening part, I find, is forcing us, or we need to be mindful of making room for the mystery, to let God be God.
Absolutely.
I think we have I mean, I'm not a psychologist or psychiatrist. I wouldn't want to, diagnose, but I think we have a problem with being in control, and we don't like to relinquish control. And we talked about this last week or 2 weeks ago when we were talking about Jesus washing the feet. And when someone serves us, we're not in control. But if I tend to you, if you ask me to help you move or help look after you, I'm the one in control. I'm the one giving. Yeah. When I'm receiving, we're not in control. And to receive from God is you can't control the outcome.
Absolutely.
We have to listen, and we do Christian meditation weekly. I do it with whoever wants to join on Wednesdays, and then I do it with our life skill class on Thursdays. And for a lot of, they're really good at it. Those life skill kids, they just love that time in the chapel. But for a lot of people, silence, you can't control what comes out of it. So when we let God be God, so let's say you and I are walking to Emmaus. where in our heads, in our feelings, Jesus comes along. We don't recognize him. He starts breaking open. Oh, but didn't you know this and this and this, and this is how the scriptures could be read. For a lot of people, they may latch on to a scripture passage and say, that's what it is. But then to have someone else come and say, you know what? What you think is that passage is saying isn't necessarily what that passage is saying. That now I've lost control.
Yeah, I think.
What do you mean? I got to think differently?
Yeah, I think one of the, and again, it's that lovely point that you made. It's the first part of the spiritual journey is allowing the person to tell their story.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes sometimes the telling of the story doesn't just happen in one block. It's ongoing. It's an ongoing. I don't know if you've ever done the timeline lifeline. If you've ever had that experience where you tell your life story and you talk about the highs and the lows.
Interesting. No, I've never done that.
It's a very, really, really interesting exercise, and then you follow the dots. I think that what the two men on the road to Emmaus are doing is that in their own way, they're going back over their story. And what Merton is doing in the back of the church is that he's also connecting the dots in the story. And finally, you have the peace. You have that. And they recognized him in the breaking of the bread. They see the traces they see those lovely footprints, those traces all along the way, and it's So I think the story of the road to Emmaus. I mean, my God, you could spend years on that text, but I think it's a very, very good. It's a very, very good story to begin a spiritual walk or a spiritual journey with anybody in the modern world today. Tell me your story. Yes. Tell me your story.
With non-judgmental listening.
Absolutely. Because Because it's not until I understand your story that I think we can then begin to tell our story.
Yes. Yeah, there's my story and then there's our story.
That's right, together.
You know what I love that's related to this is walking the labyrinth.
Oh gosh, yeah.
And I love that there's one. I heard there was one by the Eaton Centre in Toronto. So years ago, and I'm like, where? Years ago, I don't know, 5, 6 years ago, a group of us went down to Toronto with our cameras. We were just, walking around taking pictures. And we're at the Eaton Centre, and I found the doors that I've never really used before. And I'm like, oh, what's over here? And lo and behold, the labyrinth was right there. And the church, I forget the name of the church, but it's like right next to...
I think it's called Holy Trinity. It's an Anglican church, which has an amazing history. And
it's right there. And believe it or not, this was, I don't know, was it a weekday? Was it a Saturday? I can't remember. But there were a number of people from the local businesses using, walking the labyrinth. I would say about 15, 20 people at any given time are walking the labyrinth. And I was just standing there stunned, like, this is beautiful.
Yeah, great grace in the middle of the city.
Yes, it's like a little, grace, a little paradise right there in the midst where you wouldn't expect holiness to walk, right? With big business and corporate, the corporate world. And there it is. And I love that there's a labyrinth in Burlington at Central Park.
I didn't know that.
Oh, yes, it's right there. I don't remember how to get there, but I know where it is. and it's there in the public for people to use. It's beautiful.
Wow. For World Youth Day in 2001, I was meeting a bishop from Australia who came over for World Youth Day, and we went for a walk from his hotel, which was actually very close to the Eaton Centre. And he was, his background is education, and I said, I want to show you something that's really interesting. I said, I said, Toronto is a very, very modern city, and yet there are little traces of the Christian story right in the heart of the city. So I brought him to the Labyrinth.
What did he say?
He was very moved by the whole experience. Very moved by the whole experience.
I've had some powerful experiences walking the Labyrinth and just, walking with God in that process.
And what's so sad is that there are some people, religious people, who are so opposed to something like the Labyrinth as a means, as an opportunity for people to pray, to meditate, to reflect, to walk the scriptures. It's so sad, so sad.
I used to take, when I was at another high school, I would take grade 9s to Creve Hills, and they have a labyrinth on the grounds. So I would take the kids there. I would explain it briefly. I said, walk slowly. This is not a race. And of course, with a bunch of 14-year-olds, you're always wondering, like, how's it going to go? Mm-hmm. And so they would, in single file, and some would really walk slowly, and some, just kind of like, okay, we got to do this. And they would come out, and I would wait till the last one came out. And then I would, while we're still standing there next to the labyrinth, I would say, so how was that? And there'd every time there would be a handful of kids who would say, that was actually really good.
Yeah. Intense, miss.
Yeah. And I'm sure some of them are like, oh, what is she teaching us? What is this chaplain doing? But there are always a few that said, I really liked that. And so, sometimes we don't know what we need.
Absolutely.
And that's another thing about the Emmaus story, is in comes Jesus kind of showing us what we need even before we even know we need it.
Absolutely. I mean that's a lovely segue into, so what am I supposed to do? Lent is much more clearly defined of what I'm supposed to be doing. So what am I supposed to be doing during the Easter season? And I think during the Easter season, what could be very helpful for us is our openness to being surprised on the journey.
Yes.
It's our openness to the encounter on the journey. This, the longest period of time that we have in the liturgical calendar is the period of time that we call ordinary time. And it would be, that's kind of when the church is set loose on the world. So the Easter season is about unpacking at that deeper level. What does it mean to be a disciple of the Lord? What does it mean to be one who witnesses to what the Lord is doing in my life? How do I do that? What does that look like? And where have I encountered the Lord? What has my breaking of the bread moment been?
I like your point about being surprised by God. And I think Easter is all about the big surprise. Because I keep, because we're in the pandemic, I'm really, I'm fixated on the waiting, which we talked about last week. And so this past week, I've been reflecting on the waiting. So the apostles retreated into the room. They're scared. They only had their past to sort of dictate what the future might hold. And then here is this Easter event, a complete shock in a good way. It's a good shock, complete shock and surprise of what God can do. And I think that element, this is Easter, to know that even though we're in a pandemic, I think of Psalm 23, though I walk in the valley of death and darkness, I will fear no evil, for your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Well, with Easter, that line, your rod and your staff, they comfort me, has way more meaning, because now there they were in the middle of darkness, death. Jesus was just made an example, humiliated in this execution, this crucifixion. And then God says, oh, don't worry. Don't worry. I've got something cool planned. And then the Easter event, the tomb's empty. Jesus appears to the friends walking to Emmaus. Jesus appearing to Mary and walking into a room, and they're all huddled in fear. And he's like, hi, peace be with you. You know? So what's what's happening, everyone? You know, I think it's that element of being surprised that we need to make room for. Just when we think we know God, God's going to surprise us.
That's right. Just to go back to Thomas Merton again, it's to become Quakers for a little while, because in the Quaker service you wait.
Oh, really?
Until this. Oh, yeah. I went to Flushing, to where he worshipped with a Quaker community for a while. I mean, and again, we talk about connecting the pieces. So,
Yep.
so this, again with Merton's life. So you connect all those dots.
Yes.
And is it any wonder, any surprise that he chose to become a hermit? But the Quaker service, there is no order of service. It would drive you crazy. I mean, it would drive Roman Catholics crazy, because you come in and you wait, you sit and then when the Spirit moves you, I think that's a very important experience for all of us.
Yes.
To put us, and it's not making no judgment on our practices, but sometimes I think it's sometimes to allow ourselves just to put aside what we're familiar with.
Yes.
And allow ourselves to be open to the new. I know time's moving on here, but go back to the great experiences in the Old Testament scriptures. Look at the example of Jesus himself. It's time alone. And I'm sure he doesn't have the prayer book with him. It's alone, it's quiet,
Yes.
So
I think that's a good way to end, leaving room for the God to surprise us.
Absolutely.
And spending some time in the aloneness and just waiting, because God will surprise.
Yeah.
So have a good, continue your Easter journey.
Yes, I will. And you have a wonderful spring break. My gosh, anybody in education really deserves it. I had a few meetings last week and people are exhausted.
We're very, very, very tired. So we really love this week off. So I'll see you next week, Father Con.
Thank you, Adriana. Bye.
Take care.